You can't afford a queen like this." Those 6 words burned into my soul like a brand. My wealthy brother Mason stood there in his tailored black suit, the dimmed lights of the birthday hall casting a golden glow on his perfect, smug face. He had 2 of his massive security guards drag me back like I was some intruder. I could feel every pair of eyes in the room, friends, family, even strangers, fixed on my humiliation. The woman I loved, my bride-to-be, Emma, my whole world stood frozen, her angelic voice caught in her throat. Mason reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a glittering diamond ring the size of a grape, and dropped to one knee in front of her. The room gasped in unison. "Emma," he said with a syrupy confidence that made me sick, "you deserve the best. You deserve a life I know he can never give you." The crowd whispered, the air heavy with awe and pressure. My heart thudded against my ribs. I wanted to shout, to rip that ring out of his hands, but I was pinned by shame. Then Emma, she hesitated. For a moment, I saw her glance at me, her blue eyes full of conflict. But the voices around her, her friends, her cousins, even her own mother, rose like a tide. "Say yes, Emma. He's rich, girl. Don't blow this." And then she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. I felt my world collapse. My knees went weak, and the last thing I remember before the room blurred was Mason's smirk as he slid that diamond onto her finger. But that was the night everything changed. That was the night I decided I would make both of them regret humiliating me. And trust me, when I struck back, the world would remember. If you're watching this, don't forget to watch, and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you will twist your heart, shock your soul, and make you question loyalty itself. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 30 years old, and Mason is my older brother by 5 years. Growing up, people said we were close, but the truth was, Mason always had a way of making me feel small. He was clever, cunning, and cruel in ways that were easy to miss unless you were his target. Our parents were ordinary, middle-class people who worked hard to keep us fed. Dad ran a small hardware store, and Mom was a nurse who worked the night shift. They taught us humility, respect, and kindness. I took those lessons to heart. Mason? He learned how to pretend. By the time Mason was 25, he clawed his way into one of the highest-paying jobs in the States. He wore designer suits, drove luxury cars, and lived in a penthouse that looked like something out of a magazine. I, on the other hand, was content with a modest life. I worked as an assistant manager at a small bookstore. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and I loved it. Then came Emma. She wasn't just beautiful. She was breathtaking. Tall, caramel hair that shimmered in the sun, and a voice so sweet it could silence a room. The first time I heard her sing at an open mic night, my heart knew it had found its home. Emma wasn't just my fiancée. She was my dream, my future, my everything. I thought Mason would be happy for me. He wasn't. From the moment he met Emma, I saw a flicker in his eyes that made my stomach tighten. He complimented her too much, laughed too loud at her jokes, and always found reasons to be near her. At first, I brushed it off as my imagination. Mason was charming with everyone. But then little things started happening, subtle, unsettling things. He'd accidentally run into Emma when I wasn't around. He sent her expensive gifts, claiming they were from the family. Once, I caught him staring at her for too long, his expression unreadable. Emma told me he'd flirted a few times, but she reassured me she'd shut him down. I believed her. I trusted her. I trusted him. Well, as much as anyone could trust Mason. But Mason was patient. He didn't force things. He waited. Emma's birthday was coming up, and I had planned something special. I had saved for months to buy her a simple but elegant ring. It wasn't flashy, but it symbolized my love and devotion. I rented a small hall, invited our closest friends and family, and even prepared a little speech. The night started beautifully. Emma wore a pale blue dress that made her look like a princess. She sang a song for everyone, her angelic voice filling the room with magic. People laughed, clapped, and cheered. For once, I felt like I had everything I could ever need. Then Mason arrived. He didn't just walk in. He owned the room the moment he stepped through the doors. His arrival turned heads. He was wearing a jet black designer suit, a silver watch that gleamed under the lights, and a confident smirk. Two massive security guards followed him like shadows. He hadn't RSVP'd. He hadn't been invited. I tried to greet him casually, but he barely acknowledged me. He greeted Emma like she was royalty, presenting her with a velvet box containing diamond earrings. She hesitated, but accepted them to avoid causing a scene. I felt the shift in the room. Conversations quieted. All eyes moved between Mason and me. As the evening went on, Mason drank just enough to seem relaxed, but not drunk. He laughed loudly, told stories that made himself a hero, and subtly undermined me in ways only I could notice. Then, in the middle of Emma's speech thanking everyone for coming, Mason clapped his hands. The room fell silent. He walked up, placed his hand on my shoulder, and said the words that would shatter my world. "You can't afford a queen like this." The crowd gasped. Before I could react, his security grabbed me by the arms, dragging me backward as if I was some nuisance. Mason, with a flourish, produced that enormous diamond ring, and in that moment, Emma chose him. The shock left me numb. My breath caught in my throat. My life, everything I thought was solid, crumbled like dust. But what nobody knew that night was that Mason had crossed a line he would regret for the rest of his life. And Emma, she would learn the cost of betraying a man who loved her with everything he had. Because I wasn't going to stay broken. I was going to rise. And when I did, they would both fall. The night of Emma's birthday replayed in my mind like a cruel movie on an endless loop. I didn't sleep. I didn't even cry. I just lay there in the dark of my small apartment, staring at the ceiling as if the answers to my pain were hidden in the cracks above me. My phone buzzed with messages, some from friends apologizing for not stepping in, others from people who pretended to care but only wanted the latest gossip. I didn't answer any of them. By morning, I was a ghost of myself. My chest felt hollow. My body moved on autopilot. I didn't even go to work at the bookstore. I couldn't face the curious eyes or fake sympathy. I needed space, time to think. Then, around noon, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Mason. The message was short. "Don't take it personally, Ethan. You'll understand one day." I stared at the words, my blood boiling. Understand? How could I ever understand betrayal this deep? I tossed the phone across the room. The next few days blurred together. Emma didn't call. She didn't text. The woman who had once sworn she'd stand by me through thick and thin had vanished into Mason's world of wealth and glitter. Social media didn't let me forget either. Photos of Emma and Mason at fancy restaurants, Emma's hand flaunting that monstrous diamond, and comments like, "Power couple goals," mocked me from every angle. But pain has a way of turning into something else if you let it. For me, it became resolve. One afternoon, Dad stopped by my apartment. He was a simple man, rough hands from years at the hardware store, and eyes that always carried a quiet kind of wisdom. He sat down across from me at the small kitchen table, letting the silence stretch until I finally broke it. "Dad!" He humiliated me. I whispered. My voice cracked. He took everything from me. And she let him. Dad sighed, rubbing his temples. Mason's been like this his whole life. He thinks money is power. But Ethan, he leaned forward, his eyes piercing mine. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't about money. It's about timing. Don't rush into anything foolish. But deep inside, I was already planning. That evening, as I scrolled through photo after photo of Mason and Emma living the high life, something caught my eye. A post from Mason himself. Introducing the future Mrs. Mason Carter. Engagement party this weekend. Only the best for my queen. My fingers clenched around my phone. An engagement party. So fast. So public. It wasn't love. Mason was staking a claim, proving to the world he could take whatever he wanted. That was the night I decided I wouldn't just get even. I would make them both regret every smug laugh, every whispered comment, every stolen glance. But first, I needed information. I reached out to Julia, an old friend from college who worked in the same corporate world as Mason. Julia had always been sharp, and though we drifted apart over the years, I trusted her. I asked her to meet me for coffee. We met at a quiet cafe the next morning. Julia looked around nervously before speaking. Ethan, what Mason did, it's all over the place. People are talking. She lowered her voice. But you didn't hear this from me. Mason isn't as untouchable as he seems. My heart skipped. What do you mean? She hesitated, then leaned closer. He's involved in some shady deals. He's been using insider information to climb the corporate ladder. If anyone ever got proof, it would ruin him. A spark ignited in my chest. Proof. That was what I needed. Over the next week, I began quietly following Mason's moves. I watched his social media, his check-ins, even the business dinners he bragged about online. I wasn't reckless. I was patient. If Mason taught me anything, it was that revenge was a game of patience and precision. The engagement party came, held in a lavish ballroom that probably cost more than I made in a year. I wasn't invited, of course, but through mutual friends' posts, I saw everything. Emma in a glittering gown that wasn't her style, Mason basking the attention like a king, and their lips locked in a photo that felt like a knife twisting in my heart. I closed the app and took a deep breath. They could have their party. They could laugh and dance and pretend the world was theirs. But their world was built on lies, and lies have a way of collapsing. A few days later, I got a surprise call from Emma. Her voice trembled. Ethan, can we talk? My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to hang up. But curiosity, no, strategy, made me stay on the line. Talk about what? I'm not sure I did the right thing, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Mason isn't who I thought he was. Things are complicated. I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air. Please, she added, desperation creeping into her tone. Can we meet? Just once. I need to explain. Every instinct screamed not to trust her. But another part of me, the part already calculating the next move, saw an opportunity. Fine, I said finally. Tomorrow, the park near the river. Noon. The next day, I arrived early. The park was quiet, the sound of the river soothing against the chaos in my head. When Emma arrived, she looked different, tired, almost broken. Her makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. She sat down on the bench beside me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, Mason's the man you think he is. He's worse. I turned to face her, my jaw tight. You chose him, Emma. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Tears welled in her eyes. I thought I was making the right choice. But he's controlling, Ethan. He doesn't just want me. He wants to destroy you. Her words sliced through me. Destroy me? She nodded. He's been saying things about making sure you never recover, about crushing you completely. The world seemed to tilt around me. Mason wasn't satisfied with stealing Emma. He wanted to erase me. Emma reached into her purse and pulled out a small flash drive. She handed it to me with trembling fingers. This has some of his business emails. Proof of things he's done. I don't know if it's enough, but she swallowed hard. I can't stay with him, Ethan, but I'm scared. I took the drive, feeling its weight like a key to a locked door. Before I could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air. Well, Mason's voice boomed from behind us, cold and furious. Isn't this touching? I spun around to see him standing a few feet away, two of his security guards flanking him like wolves. His expression was a storm. Emma's face went pale. Mason stepped closer, his smirk gone, replaced by something darker. You think you can plot against me, little brother? The tension was suffocating. The river's gentle sound was drowned out by the pounding of my heart. Mason took another step forward, his hand sliding into his coat pocket. And that was the moment everything changed again, because what Mason pulled out of his pocket wasn't just a threat. It was something that would send all of our lives spiraling into chaos. The glint of cold steel caught the afternoon sun. Mason had pulled a gun. Time seemed to freeze. The sound of the river vanished. Even the breeze stilled. Emma gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. My heart thudded in my chest, so hard I thought it might burst. Mason's voice was low and deadly. You really thought you could humiliate me? Sneaking around, digging for dirt? My little brother, the bookstore clerk, Thinks he can outsmart me? I stood slowly, my hands raised slightly. Mason, you don't need to do this. His eyes burned. Oh, but I do. You've already embarrassed me by meeting her behind my back. And Emma, he sneered at her. You were supposed to be smarter. You could have had everything without this drama. Emma's tears streaked her face. Mason, please, don't do this. Shut up, he snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. One of his guards shifted uncomfortably. Boss, maybe this isn't the place. Quiet. Mason barked, not taking his eyes off me. I could feel the weight of the flash drive in my pocket. A fragile piece of hope. My mind raced. I couldn't let Mason see it. I couldn't let him win. Mason, I said, keeping my voice steady even as adrenaline surged through me. You've got money, power, everything. And yet you're here, pointing a gun at your own brother. What does that say about you? His lips curled into a snarl. It says I finish what I start. Emma stepped between us, her hands trembling. If you hurt him, you'll regret it. Mason, you're spiraling. His hand twitched, the gun jerking slightly. For a second, I thought he might actually shoot her by mistake. Step aside, Emma, he growled. But she didn't. She stood firm, her voice trembling but fierce. No. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. It was small, barely there, but I saw it. Suddenly, from the far side of the park, a jogger appeared. He noticed the scene, Mason's suit, the gun glinting in the light, and froze. Mason cursed under his breath. Realizing they weren't as hidden as he thought, he shoved the gun back into his coat, masking the move with a casual stretch of his arms. Fine, he hissed, but this isn't over. He gestured to his guards. Let's go. They left quickly, disappearing into a sleek black SUV parked down the street. Emma collapsed onto the bench, shaking. I sat beside her, my own body trembling now that the danger had passed. He's dangerous, she whispered. More than I ever knew. I clenched my fists. He's also sloppy. That flash drive you gave me, it's our weapon now. That night, I stayed up going through the files. My laptop screen glowed in the darkroom, illuminating pages of damning emails, shady transactions, and evidence that Mason had been bribing officials and leaking insider information to climb the corporate ladder. Each file was worse than the last. My hands shook as I read them, but not from fear, from excitement. Mason wasn't untouchable anymore, but power like his doesn't crumble easily. I knew I couldn't go straight to the police. Not yet. Mason had influence everywhere. If I made the wrong move, he'd bury me before the truth could come out. The next day, I met with Julia again. She scanned the files, her eyes widening. Ethan, this is huge, but you can't just drop this. If Mason catches wind of what you're planning, he'll destroy you. I'm not backing down, I said, but I need a plan. Something airtight. Julia nodded, her jaw set. Then we play it smart. We gather more. Enough to make it impossible for him to wriggle out. Meanwhile, Emma had vanished. She didn't return Mason's calls or mine. I didn't blame her. She was trapped between worlds. But I couldn't afford to focus on her now. My brother's downfall had to come first. A week later, I got a call that chilled me to the bone. Ethan Carter? A stern voice asked. Yes. This is Officer Reynolds with the city police. We need you to come down to the station immediately. It's about your brother. My stomach nodded. I arrived at the station to find Mason sitting in a holding cell, his expensive suit wrinkled, his perfect hair slightly out of place. Even in cuffs, he looked smug. Reynolds pulled me aside. Your brother's accusing you of blackmail and corporate espionage. Says you stole confidential company files. My blood ran cold. Mason had struck first. That's ridiculous. I said, he's lying. Reynolds gave me a hard look. Maybe, but Mason Carter is a powerful man. He's already called in lawyers. If he presses charges, this would get ugly. I felt the walls closing in. Mason was playing dirty, faster than I'd anticipated. As I left the station, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. If you don't hand over what you took, next time it won't be a warning. The threat was clear. That night, As I walked back to my apartment, the sound of footsteps followed me through the quiet streets. I turned a corner, and two figures in dark hoodies stepped out of the shadows. One of them growled, "Boss says you're done meddling." Before I could react, a fist slammed into my ribs, knocking the wind out of me. I staggered, gasping for air, but another punch sent me sprawling onto the pavement. The flash drive, my only leverage, slipped from my pocket, skidding across the asphalt. One of the men bent down to grab it. I lunged desperately, grabbing his ankle, but he kicked me hard in the shoulder. Pain exploded through me. They snatched the drive, and the taller one leaned down, his voice a low, menacing whisper. "Mason warned you." Then they were gone, their footsteps fading into the night. I lay there on the cold pavement, bruised and bleeding, the weight of defeat crushing me. Mason had taken back the evidence. My one chance at justice gone. But as I struggled to my feet, wiping the blood from my lip, a fierce determination burned inside me. He thought he'd broken me. He thought that was the end. He was wrong. Because Mason didn't know the second copy of that flash drive was hidden in a place he'd never think to look. And the next move would be mine. But before I could take it, something even darker loomed on the horizon. Something that would drag this battle into a place I hadn't imagined and put my life on the line in a way I wasn't ready for. The bruises on my ribs throbbed with every breath, but the fire inside me burned hotter than the pain. Mason thought he'd erased my leverage. He had no idea that the second flash drive, the one containing every damning email, every shady transaction, was tucked safely behind a loose brick in Dad's old hardware store. It wasn't just evidence now, it was my lifeline. I spent the next day moving like a man on borrowed time. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every stranger's glance seemed like a warning. Mason had money, men, and influence, but I had patience and now rage. That evening Julia called. Her voice was tight. "Ethan, you're all over the corporate rumor mill. Mason's telling everyone you're desperate, unstable, that you're trying to ruin him because you're jealous." I let out a bitter laugh. Jealous? He stole my fiancée, Julia. He humiliated me in front of everyone I know, and now he's trying to bury me alive. Her silence said everything. "I still have the proof," I added quietly. "He doesn't know it." Julia hesitated. "Then we need to hit him where it hurts. But this can't just be about exposing him. It has to be timed perfectly. If we go too soon, he'll use his lawyers to twist the narrative." "Then we wait," I said, though Patience gnawed at me. "But we make him sweat first." That night, I made an anonymous call to a local reporter who had been sniffing around for corporate corruption stories. I didn't give my name. I didn't give specifics. I only said, "Watch Mason Carter closely. He's not the man he pretends to be." Then I hung up. The next day, Emma called again. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice trembling. "Mason, he's been watching me. He checks my phone, my emails. I'm scared, Ethan." A part of me wanted to tell her she'd chosen this. But when I heard the fear in her voice, my anger softened, just a little. "Emma, listen to me. You need to stay calm. Don't let him suspect you've turned on him. I'll get you out of this, but you need to be careful." She sobbed quietly on the line. "I don't know how much longer I can pretend." "Pretend," I said firmly. "For now, pretend." Later that night, I decided to rattle Mason. I left an unmarked envelope on the doorstep of his penthouse. Inside was a single printed email from the stolen files, just enough to prove I still had something he couldn't control. No signature, no note, just the proof. The following morning, my phone lit up with an unknown number. When I answered, Mason's voice was a growl. "You're playing a dangerous game, Ethan. Game's what you're good at." I replied evenly. There was a pause that told me I'd hit a nerve. Then he hung up. For a few days, nothing happened. It was almost worse than the attacks and the threats. The silence was suffocating, like the world was holding its breath. Then came the call that shattered it. "Ethan Carter?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but urgent. "This is Detective Harris. I need you to come to the station. It's about your brother." My pulse spiked. I arrived at the station to find Harris waiting with a grim expression. "There was an incident last night," he said. "A fire. Mason Carter's penthouse." My stomach flipped. "Is he?" "He's fine," Harris interrupted. "He wasn't home at the time." "But," he hesitated, lowering his voice, "he's accusing you. Says you threatened him. Sent him anonymous messages. And now his place just happens to catch fire." Shock ripped through me. "That's insane. I had nothing to do with that." Harris studied my face for a long moment. "I'm not saying I believe him, but right now, the timing doesn't look good for you." I left the station, my head spinning. Someone had set that fire, and Mason was using it to tighten the noose around my neck. That evening, as I walked through the quiet streets toward my apartment, my phone buzzed again. It was Emma. Her voice was a frantic whisper. "Ethan, Mason's worse than you know. He's been meeting with people, dangerous people. I overheard him on the phone tonight. He said if you don't back down, you're not going to make it to see next month." The threat hit me like a punch. My brother wasn't just trying to ruin my life. He was willing to end it. "Emma, listen to me," I said urgently. "You need to stay somewhere safe. Don't go back to him tonight." She was crying now. "I don't know where to go." I hesitated, then made a choice. "Come to my place. Just for tonight. I'll keep you safe." An hour later, Emma arrived, her face pale, her hand shaking. Seeing her standing there, fragile and terrified, stirred something complicated in me. Love, anger, betrayal, and something darker, the hunger for justice. She stepped inside, and I closed the door behind her. For a few hours, we sat in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on us. But as midnight approached, the silence broke. A crash shattered the stillness. The sound of glass exploding from the living room window. Emma screamed. I lunged for her, dragging her down behind the couch as another crash followed. A brick sailed to the broken window, landing on the floor with a thud. I crawled to it, my heart pounding. Tied to the brick was a note. I tore it open, my hand shaking. The message was scrawled in thick black marker. Last warning. Next time, it won't just be glass. I stared at the words, the broken glass glittering on the floor like ice. Mason wasn't just tightening the screws. He was declaring war. Emma clutched my arm, her eyes wide with terror. "Ethan, what are we going to do?" I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm even as rage boiled inside me. "This ends," I said quietly, "on my terms." But even as I spoke, I knew the game had escalated beyond anything I planned. The next move would have to be bold, dangerous, and possibly deadly. Outside, the sound of a car engine roared to life and faded into the night, leaving us alone in the wreckage of shattered glass and broken trust. And somewhere out there, Mason was already plotting his next strike. The sound of that engine fading into the night stayed with me long after the street outside my apartment fell silent. I kept replaying it, the shattering glass, the note tied to the brick, Emma's trembling voice. "Ethan, what are we going to do?" That was the moment I knew waiting wasn't an option anymore. Mason had crossed into violence. The next strike wouldn't be a warning. Emma sat curled on my couch, her hands wrapped around a mug of untouched tea. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her usually perfect hair a mess. She looked like a stranger compared to the confident, radiant woman I'd once planned to marry. Seeing her like this, broken and scared, both hurt and hardened me. "We can't stay here," I said finally. "He knows where I live. If he sent that warning tonight, he could come back or send someone else." Emma glanced up, fear flickering in her eyes. "Then where?" I thought for a long moment. There was only one place Mason wouldn't think to look. Dad's hardware store. The old office in the back. He hasn't stepped foot there since college. We packed quickly, moving like ghosts in the dark, and drove across town in silence. Every pair of headlights behind us felt like a threat. Every shadow on the roadside looked like an ambush. When we arrived, the store was dark, the faded sign swaying slightly in the night breeze. Inside, the place smelled like sawdust and oil, a smell that brought back memories of simpler times, before betrayal and humiliation. I unlocked the back office. where a single dusty lamp flickered to life. Emma sank into an old chair, her shoulders slumped. I reached behind a loose brick where I'd hidden the second flash drive and pulled it out, holding it like a weapon. "This is the key to everything," I said. Emma watched me, her voice trembling. "Mason won't stop, Ethan. You know that, right?" I nodded. "That's why we're not just going to expose him. We're going to destroy him, publicly, so he can't recover." The next morning, I called Julia. When I told her where we were, she showed up an hour later, slipping inside the store with a hood over her head. She gasped when I handed her the drive. "We need a way to make this undeniable," she said. "Something so big, even his lawyers can't spin it." I tapped the flash drive. "These files are enough, right?" Julia hesitated. "They're bad, but Mason's a master manipulator. If we just hand these over, he'll claim they're fake or that you doctored them. We need witnesses, corroboration, people on the inside who can confirm this is real." Emma spoke for the first time in a while. "There's a man named Victor Torres. He used to work with Mason. I overheard Mason screaming at him once about keeping his mouth shut. Maybe he'd talk." Julia nodded slowly. "I can find him. But if Mason catches wind of this, he'll make a move." The three of us spent the next day in that dusty office, planning. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart race. Every vibration of my phone felt like a bomb waiting to go off. Late in the afternoon, Emma's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and went pale. "It's Mason," she whispered. She answered, putting the phone on speaker. Mason's voice filled the room, smooth but sharp as a blade. "Emma, sweetheart, where you? You disappeared. Do you have any idea how that makes me look?" Her voice shook. I needed time to think." There was a pause, then his tone darkened. "Don't test me, Emma. You know what I'm capable of." She hung up, tears sliding down her cheeks. I put a hand on her shoulder, but inside, I felt the heat of rage simmering. That night, I stepped outside the store to clear my head. The street was empty, the moonlight casting long shadows over the cracked pavement. I thought about what Mason had done, about how he'd taken Emma, humiliated me, tried to crush me, and now threatened our lives. For the first time, the weight of revenge didn't just feel like a plan. It felt like a promise. By morning, Julia returned with news. "I found Victor. He's in hiding. Mason ruined his life. But he's willing to meet if we can guarantee his safety." We arranged to meet him in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, a place Julia said was neutral and discreet. The drive there was tense. Emma sat quietly in the back seat, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Julia gripped the steering wheel, her eyes scanning every car behind us. When we arrived, the warehouse loomed like a skeleton in the dim light. Inside, Victor was waiting, a gaunt man with tired eyes and a nervous twitch. "I don't know how you found me," he said, his voice low, "but if Mason learns I'm talking to you, I'm dead." "We'll protect you," I said, "but you need to help us take him down." Victor nodded slowly. "He's been laundering money through shell companies. He bribed a federal inspector to look the other way on a merger that should have been illegal. I have copies of some of the records. I was too scared to go public, but if you're serious..." Before I could answer, a noise echoed from outside, the crunch of tires on gravel. Julia's head snapped toward the door. Emma whispered, "Did anyone else know we'd be here?" "No," I said, my pulse spiking. A beam of light from a flashlight cut across the warehouse floor. Then another. The sound of footsteps grew louder, heavy, deliberate. Victor's face drained of color. He found us. The footsteps stopped just outside the doorway. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then Mason's voice slid into the darkness like a blade. Well, family reunion." He stepped inside, flanked by two of his guards, their hands hovering near their holsters. His smirk was gone. His eyes were cold steel. "You just don't learn, Ethan," he said softly. "I warned you. I gave you chances. But now," he gestured toward the guards, "now I have to finish this." The guards stepped forward, their boots echoing on the concrete floor. Victor stumbled back, Julia froze, and Emma clutched my arm so tightly it hurt. And then, without warning, the sound of sirens wailed outside the warehouse, growing louder, closer, filling the night air. Mason's eyes widened just slightly, the first crack in his armor. The warehouse was suddenly a battlefield of shadows and noise, and I realized the game had shifted again. Only this time, none of us knew who had just changed the rules. The red and blue light splashed through the broken warehouse windows, cutting through the darkness like knives. Mason's guards hesitated for the first time, their hands hovering uncertainly near their holsters. The wail of the sirens grew deafening, bouncing off the concrete walls. Mason's smirk wavered. What is this?" he muttered, his voice low but edged with panic. Before he could react, a dozen officers stormed into the warehouse, weapons drawn, shouting commands. "Hands where we can see them. On the ground, now." The guards froze, then slowly lowered themselves to the floor. Mason didn't move. His mind was still calculating, still hunting for an exit, as if charm or money could get him out of this one. But this time there was no escape. Julia stepped forward, holding her phone high. "I called them," she said, her voice steady. "I sent them everything. Your files, Victor's testimony, every record you thought you'd buried." Mason's eyes flickered to me, hatred and disbelief swirling behind his expression. You betrayed your own brother." I stepped closer, my voice calm but laced with years of pent-up anger. "You stopped being my brother the night you humiliated me in front of everyone I loved. This isn't betrayal, Mason. This is justice." The officers moved in, handcuffing Mason as he struggled, still trying to summon his old arrogance. "You don't understand who you're messing with," he shouted, his voice echoing through the warehouse. "I own this city. You think this changes anything?" Victor stepped forward, trembling but resolute. "It already has." The officers escorted Mason and his guards out, their shouts fading into the night. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter, the weight on my chest lifting. Emma collapsed into my arms, sobbing not from fear this time, but relief. Julia looked at me, her lips curling into the first real smile I'd seen on her in weeks. "You did it, Ethan. We did it." Outside, the cool night air hit my face as we stepped into the glow of the police cars. Mason sat in the back of a cruiser, his head bent low, his perfect suit rumpled. For years, he'd been untouchable, too rich, too powerful, too cunning. Now he was just a man in handcuffs, staring out at the brother he had tried to crush. The trial that followed was brutal. Mason's lawyers tried every trick in the book, denying evidence, blaming Victor, even accusing me of fabricating the files. But the truth was overwhelming. Victor's testimony, the bank transfers, the shell companies. And when the judge read the sentence, 15 years without parole, Mason's mask finally cracked. He didn't look at me as they led him away. Maybe for the first time in his life, he felt small. Emma stood beside me outside the courthouse, the wind tugging at her hair. "I can't believe it's over," she whispered. I glanced at her, my heart heavy with memories. There had been a time when I dreamed of a future with her, a quiet home, laughter in the mornings, growing old together. But betrayal changes people. Trust doesn't grow back overnight. "We're free of him," I said quietly. "That's what matters." In the months that followed, Emma and I drifted apart. Not out of anger, but out of understanding. Too much had been broken between us. She left town for a fresh start, and I wished her well. Julia kept in touch, sometimes teasing me for being too humble when the press called me a hero for taking Mason down. Victor rebuilt his life, finally free of Mason's shadow. As for me, I went back to the hardware store, back to the smell of sawdust and oil, back to the simple life I had once thought was enough. But now I knew better. Humility wasn't weakness. Kindness wasn't poverty. They were strength, more valuable than any diamond ring Mason had ever flashed. One evening, as the sun set behind the store, I stood out back and watched the sky turn gold. For the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Mason had tried to humiliate me, to break me, to steal everything I loved. But in the end, it wasn't his wealth or his schemes that won. It was patience. It was truth. It was the quiet resolve of the man who refused to become as cruel as the brother who betrayed him. And as the last light faded from the horizon, I smiled not out of triumph, but out of gratitude. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in destroying your enemy. It's in surviving him and walking away whole.